whether it's their kink or not. Just because you like something doesn't make it okay. What I'm going to suggest is that if all parties involved are consenting adults, if they like something that they are doing, something that they are exploring for sexual gratification, yeah, that makes it okay. If this is a controversial ethos, I honestly don't think it should be. More than 50 years ago, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau here in Canada famously said, "The state has no business in the bedrooms of the nation." He was speaking specifically here about decriminalizing gay sex, but there's a reason that he was so ambiguous and inclusive with his choice of words. You should be free to do whatever you consent to do. And I'm also reminded here of a conversation that I had with a friend who's a couples therapist about a decade or so ago, specifically about what she says to people who feel shame over the things that they like. And that is, there are no politics in the bedroom. If you're not hurting anyone and you like it, it is okay.
What is shame? In an article posted on verywellmind.com, Arlen Kunsick notes that shame is a feeling of embarrassment or humiliation that arises from the perception of having done something dishonorable, immoral, or improper. While shame is a negative emotion, its origins play a part in our survival as a species. Without shame, we might not feel the need to adhere to cultural norms, follow laws, or behave in a way that allows us to exist as social beings. In other words, shame is an important feeling that allows us to correct behavior that would otherwise impede participation in society. It is for this reason that prior to the internet, men would hide their porn magazine collections and not boast so loudly about going to strip clubs. Being open about these actions would reveal their sexualization of women and cause judgment by peers, which could cause a negative reaction that would lead to exclusion. It is also for this reason that kinks used to be hidden and rarely discussed openly. However, in recent years, the sex positivity movement has led to the normalization of kinks, to the extent that any negative reaction to them or criticism of kinks is viewed as prudish and bigoted.
Girls, if you call your boyfriend daddy in bed and he responds with, "my little girl,"
Hey, yeah, quick question. When did we decide kink-shaming was cool? Because you go on to talk about your braiding kink, which is not my cup of tea. But I'm not going to make a video about how weird or questionable that is. And when somebody told you to look into it in your comment section, you compared it to pedophilia. Somebody who's been in the kink community for a decade, this behavior sucks. Stop it. You don't have to like it. Especially considering a lot of people work through their own personal traumas through kink, and you're going to compare these people to pedophiles. Okay. We don't kink shame as long as everybody's adult, consenting, and practicing SCC and RAC. Fuck off.
This, in turn, makes it difficult to hold any critical discussion of disturbing trends, such as the rising prevalence of strangulation, violent sex, and hypersexualization, without being immediately shut down via identity politics, as anyone who raises criticism of these topics is deemed conservative or assumed that the issue arises from religion. For example, as porn use has become more and more prevalent, so too has the variety of what is available. One can find a sexual interpretation of any scenario, from teacher and student, male woman, police officers, nurses, maids, checkout girls, taxi drivers, pizza delivery. If one can imagine it, it surely exists.
Nurses are not safe. I want to have a very serious conversation with you as a new grad, as a nursing student, as a nurse, and as the general public. As many of you guys know, I went into nursing as a plan B. I went into nursing because it was convenient for the life I wanted to live. Or so I thought. They were not teaching me in nursing school just how dangerous it is to be a nurse. They were teaching me to cover my ass, but actually cover the hospital's ass. Caring for patients is the easiest part of the job. Taking care of somebody who is sick is easy because I'm empathetic, I'm sympathetic, and I want to make a difference. But this is getting out of control. Out of control. I am seeing more and more posts, articles, newsletters, not from news stations, because God forbid they let the general public know that this is happening, but from nursing blogs, that nurses are being unalived or unaliving themselves because of what we are dealing with in our workplace. Nurses are not paid enough to deal with the bullshit we have to deal with. This is Jan Allison. She is a home health nurse that lost her life after going to care for a patient. She allegedly passed away after being assaulted by the patient in his home. This is some information I found on Reddit, and it is truly daunting if you keep scrolling how many similar stories there are to Jan's. Something has got to be done. We need the people, the general public, to be rooting for us and doing something about this. The news outlets are not going to tell you what's actually going on in our workplace every single day. Because this doesn't just happen in somebody's home with home health nurses. This happens in the ER. It happens in the ICU. It happens in the parking garage when we're trying to walk into work. This has got to stop.
Views seem to recognize that in having a sexual interpretation of any situation a woman can be in, pornography fosters a belief that women are always sexually available. While this may sound odd to older individuals or to women, those who have become indoctrinated into misogynistic groups, such as incels, believe that women are able to have sex whenever they want, and their anger stems from a belief that they are wrongly being denied sex.
There's no such thing as a femcel. Incel means involuntarily celibate, because femcells, I don't know what you're trying to say. Femalatorily celibate? It also doesn't make sense because women never really have to be celibate. They just have to lower their standards. The problem with incel men is that they've already tried doing that, and still nobody wanted to have intercourse with them. Women are not validated by having intercourse with just anyone. Men are. And typically, if women are celibate, it is because they're not willing to lower their standards just to have sex with a man. That's why they could never be considered involuntarily celibate. That's called voluntary celibacy. That's called, I'm going to abstain voluntarily. The difference between involuntarily celibate men is that they have said, I will take anything. I will have sex with anybody, no matter what. And they still end up having to pay for it. They still end up having to get it somewhere where it's involuntary for somebody else, but they are, doing it for financial reasons. That still is involuntary. That's bought and paid for. And that's why these men also fantasize about grape so much. They know there's a difference between incels and femcells. And that difference is no matter how undesirable a woman may be to most men, she could still get sex from most of them. For men, it is the exact opposite. So if we are just talking about celibacy, right, like an incel, someone who's involuntarily celibate, they're not looking for a relationship, they're just looking for sex, then you cannot compare women in the same category because women are almost always voluntarily celibate. I hope that helps. I'm gonna go eat my bagel now. Mwah.
Pornography also is served to normalize incest. The more that one watches pornography, the more extreme it needs to be in order to elicit the same response as the initial viewing. An article titled, How Porn Can Become an Escalating Behavior notes this process. It reads, users require more and more of their drug of choice to get the same high, and their pattern of abuse is driven by their need for a greater quantity. This is especially true when the abuse is spiraling into addiction. Desensitization refers to a numb pleasure response or inability to achieve the same high, a consumer once did. Desensitization results from too much dopamine, the so-called pleasure chemical. Your brain generates different amounts of dopamine in response to all sorts of experiences. These experiences range from kissing to looking at something beautiful to eating a great meal. Dopamine is your body's way of telling you, this is awesome, we should do this as often as possible. Certain activities, like drug use and porn consumption, turn up your brain's dopamine production as high as it can go. What this means is that what the porn consumer wants is not just more porn. They desire new content, new people, new imaginary partners, new situations. And as luck would have it, internet pornography offers them exactly the endless variety of sexual partners and situations to attempt to gratify that desire. Consumers may also seek out other aspects of pornography, such as secrecy, shock value, taboos, and shame. These things offer varying ways to feed a desire for novelty and excitement. And for consumers who consistently view this type of material, it is possible to find their sexual interest eventually deviating in very unexpected directions. In one 2016 study, researchers found that 46.9% of respondents reported that, over time, they began watching pornography that had previously disinterested or disgusted them. These findings are consistent with other research that demonstrates that changing taste and escalation are not uncommon experiences among consumers of porn. While this can and does lead to extremes such as bestiality and child pornography, one of the more common results is the rise of interest in pseudo-incest.
He is my biological father.
That's right, John and Jenny are biological father and daughter. He's 61, she's 39.
We're normal intellectual adults who have had careers, have had a normal life like everybody else, but fallen in love with each other when we are biologically related, when we've discovered each other later in life.
I class myself as a man who's met a woman and we got romantically involved.
Knowing it was wrong in so many ways, John and Jenny walked away from their respective partners and set up home together in South Australia. They would break the greatest taboo of all. Jenny fell pregnant with their baby.
You didn't think it was wrong, let alone illegal, to be in a relationship with your daughter?
I knew it was illegal, of course I knew it was illegal, but, you know, so what?
He's not too bad.
He's not too bad in what sense?
As in man-woman sense. And like you might look at a man across the bar at a nightclub.
Australian authorities charged John and Jenny with incest after they too were dobbed in by relatives. They're on a 3-year good behaviour bond, and for them as well, is out.
John, the courts want you to stop having a physical relationship.
Yes.
Can you do that and keep the relationship together?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
John and Jenny insist there are no victims in their relationship. But therapist Joe Soul believes their children, Alex and Samantha, and especially Celeste, will be psychologically scarred by their upbringing.
I can't even wrap my head around it. Her father and mother are father and daughter. What's that going to be like? What's that going to teach her about the world? What is she going to think about herself, about how she was created? How could any child of a union like that not be a victim? How are they going to grow up and not have it torture them?
Where taboo nature brings a new flavor to pornography. While many like to claim that fiction does not affect reality, incest is far more prevalent than estimates initially illustrated, and with the advent of DNA testing, this is becoming more and more obvious. In an article titled, "DNA Tests Are Uncovering the True Prevalence of Incest," Sarah Zhang notes that, in 1975, a psychiatric textbook put the frequency of incest at 1 in a million. But this number is almost certainly a dramatic underestimate. The stigma around openly discussing incest, which often involves child sexual abuse, has long made the subject difficult to study. In the 1980s, feminist scholars argued, based on the testimonies of victims, that incest was far more common than recognized, and in recent years, DNA has offered a new kind of biological proof. Widespread genetic testing is uncovering case after secret case of children born to close biological relatives, providing an unprecedented accounting of incest in modern society. The geneticist Jim Wilson at the University of Edinburgh was shocked by the frequency he found in the UK. Biobank, an anonymized research database. 1 in 7,000 people, according to his unpublished analysis, was born to parents who were first-degree relatives, a brother and sister, or a parent and child. That is way, way more than I think many people would ever imagine, he told me. And this number is just the floor. It reflects only the cases that resulted in pregnancy, that did not end in miscarriage or abortion, and that led to the birth of a child who grew into an adult who had volunteered for a research study. In the overwhelming majority of cases, Moore told me, the parents are a father and a daughter, or an older brother and a younger sister, meaning a child's existence was likely evidence of sexual abuse.
Have you guys heard about this crazy incest case between father and daughter? In 1995, 20-year-old Stephen Plato met 15-year-old Alyssa Gracia, and they both ended up having a child, a baby girl named Denise. When they had Denise, they began to struggle financially, and Alyssa also noticed that Stephen began physically abusing their daughter. So she decided that it would be best that they give her up for adoption. In 2016, Denise is all grown up. She's 18 years old, and now her name is Katie. She decided that she wanted to locate her biological parents, Stephen and Alyssa, and she actually began to live with them. When Katie moved in with her biological parents, Alyssa noticed that Stephen started acting very different, and also he began to dress a lot better, and she just thought it was really weird. In 2017, Katie got pregnant, and guess who the father was? Her own father. 2 months after Stephen and Alyssa's divorce was finalized, Katie and Stephen got married. When they gave birth to their baby boy, they were then arrested and were charged for incest, and later on they were set free on bond. In 2018, Katie began to see a different side of Stephen, so she decided to end the relationship. What happened after is devastating. Stephen took their newborn baby, he suffocated him and then put him in a closet, and then he shot and killed Katie and her adoptive dad, and then he turned the gun on himself.
Not only is incest far more prevalent than many were led to believe, but it remains a highly gendered experience, wherein women and girls tend to be abused by male figures and their families. While many claim that sexualizing incest is just fantasy or a way to get off, it's important to note that nothing exists in a vacuum, and that incest is an awful reality for many people. Just as porn has served as a catalyst for pedophilic attraction, so too will incestuous pornography create a demand for real-life incest. The violence within pornography has increased over the past few decades as well, normalizing violence in sex. Even those who are not comfortable with violent sex often find themselves participating due to how normalized it is. This illustrates how pornography influences even those who don't watch it. Peggy Orenstein explores this issue in an op-ed in the New York Times titled "The Troubling Trend in Teenage Sex." She notes, nearly 2/3 of women in her most recent campus representative survey of 5,000 students at an anonymized major Western university said a partner had choked them during sex, 1/3 in their most recent encounter. The rate of those women who said they were between the ages 12 and 17 the first time that it happened had shot up to 40% from 1 in 4. Sexual strangulation, nearly always of women in heterosexual pornography, has long been a staple on free sites, those default sources of sex ed for teens. As with anything else, repeat exposure can render the once appalling appealing. It's not uncommon for behaviors to be normalized in porn, move within a few years to mainstream media, then, in what may become a feedback loop, be adopted in the bedroom or the dorm room. In my interviews, college students have seen male orgasm as a given. Women's is nice if it happens, but certainly not expected or necessarily prioritized by either partner. It makes sense then that fulfillment will be less the motivator for choking than appearing adventurous or kinky. Such performances don't always feel good. Personally, my hypothesis is that this is one of the reasons young people are delaying or having less sex, Dr. Herbernick said, because it's uncomfortable and weird and scary. At times, some of them literally think someone is assaulting them, but they don't know. Those are the only sexual experiences for some people. And it's not just once they've gotten naked. They'll say things like, "I've only tried to make out with someone once because he started choking and hitting me."
Hi everybody, let's talk about the topic of strangulation. So I have covered so many domestic violence cases over my career as a crime reporter, and we used to call it choking, right? Oh, he choked her. Oh, we choked her out. But a few years ago, law enforcement and all those who work with domestic violence victims says they're not going to call it choking anymore. It needs to be called what it is, which is strangulation. I have so many women in the affidavits that I read and the interviews that I do. So he strangled her until she lost consciousness. He strangled her until she peed her pants. He strangled her and she doesn't remember what happened. So you guys, all domestic violence experts will tell you now that if a person is likely to strangle you, then they are 7 to 11 times more likely to kill you. And so many of these cases happen on a regular basis. And maybe there's no visible injuries on the outside, but my experts say that that's pretty common, that what you need to look for when you go there is to see if they sound hoarse, if there's a change in their voice. But oftentimes, because the damage is done on the inside, what you see is the symptoms show up later. I've seen victims who later had a stroke, who have had seizures, who ended up with brain damage, but not necessarily the day the strangulation happens, which is why it's so important. And when some of our domestic violence victims go to our safety center here, they'll say, "Are you bleeding? Are you having chest pains? Have you been strangled?" I mean, that's how important it is, so they can get a clear medical picture. I tell people all the time when I talk to these victims, they're like, "Lori, he just shoved me. He just kicked me. He just pushed me down. Oh, he just hit me, but apologized." But that, you guys, all of that is a lie, right? Because if he's going to do that, that's going to escalate. But I'm telling you, if a person is willing to strangle you, which is literally bringing you to the brink of death and then letting you live, and I've seen suspects do it over and over. They'll strangle them until they're almost passed out and let them breathe. They'll strangle them again until they almost pass out and let them breathe. That is all about a person who is willing to take you to the brink of death and beyond, and you need to take that seriously as a victim. Just now, like law enforcement in the last last several years has really started changing the laws, prosecuting people more for these strangulations and taking that seriously. So if you have a friend or a loved one who tells you they've been strangled by someone they're in a relationship with, you need to impress upon them that that person is much more likely to kill them. Be safe out there.
Kink shaming needs to return. Wanting to hurt your partner during sex, risking death for an orgasm, sexualizing inherently abusive dynamics. These are all actions that pornography has served to normalize and which perpetuates harm against everyone, including men, women, and especially children. Shame serves as a guiding force that at least dampens the public acceptance of these activities. The refusal to critique these issues, lest one be labeled vanilla, benefits only a few and harms so many more. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I feel like if you are sexually active or a teenager or a young adult in this period, you've probably had at least one date where someone's first thought was, instead of a kiss goodnight, let me choke you, which is incredibly insane that it's happening not just in heterosexual partnerships, but within lesbian partnerships as well. Pornography is so normalized that no one even bothers to ask if they can choke you. They just put their hand around your neck and they think that's cute, that it's sexy, that it's totally worth risking death because they think there's a safe way you could choke someone. And of course, they even use that word, choke, when truthfully, it's strangulation, and there's no safe way to do it. I'm very frustrated about how normalized this is, but I do hope that at least some people are starting to wake up to the nature of this trend, which only serves a select few people and harms way, way more. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!